The Great Hall of Thessaly Prime stretched for nearly a kilometer. Its walls were made of living crystal that sang soft melodies when light touched them. Thousands of alien delegates filled the curved seats, representing 847 species from across the galaxy. They had gathered to witness something they found amusing: humanity's first formal petition to the Galactic Concord. Ambassador stood alone on the speaking platform. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes. Behind her, a holographic display showed Earth, a blue marble floating in the darkness of space. She had traveled 11 months to reach this station. She had prepared for this moment her entire life. "Honored members of the Concord," she began, her voice steady. "Humanity comes before you not as beggars but as equals. We seek partnership, we seek trade, and we seek to join your military alliance so that together we might protect our worlds from those who would threaten peace." A sound rippled through the hall. It took a moment to recognize it. They were laughing. High Arbiter Eth rose from his seat at the center of the council. He was an ancient species whose bodies were made of living crystal, much like the walls of this very hall. Light passed through him, creating rainbows on the floor. He had lived for 4,000 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had never seen anything quite like these humans. "Ambassador," he said, his voice like wind chimes in a storm, "the Concord has reviewed your species' application with great interest. Your scientists show promise. Your art is curious. Your determination to reach the stars despite your short is admirable." He paused, and the crystal of his body flickered with what might have been amusement. "However, we must address the matter of your military capabilities. You have submitted a weapons manifest to our review committee. I must confess, it has caused quite a stir." Kept her expression neutral. "We believe transparency was appropriate." "Indeed," Eth gestured, and a holographic display appeared beside him. It showed human weapons, rifles that fired metal projectiles, missiles tipped with nuclear warheads, bombs designed to scatter fragments of steel through the air. "Your species still uses kinetic weaponry. You propel chunks of metal at each other using controlled explosions. You have weapons that poison the very land they strike for generations. You have devices designed not to kill cleanly, but to maim and terrorize." Another delegate spoke up, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish filled with stars. "They still use fragmentation weapons, weapons designed to tear flesh, in what civilized species still tears flesh." "We also noticed," another delegate added, this one resembling a tall insect with kind eyes, "that your species has not fought a major war among yourselves in over 2 centuries, and yet you maintain enough weapons to destroy your own planet several times over. Why?" Had expected this question. She had an answer prepared, something diplomatic about deterrence and peace through strength. But standing here, being laughed at by creatures who had never known true desperation, she found that the diplomatic answer felt like a lie. "Because we remember," she said simply. The hall grew quiet. "My species has been killing each other since before we could write. We have fought over land, over food, over ideas, over gods, over nothing at all. We have used rocks and spears and swords and guns and bombs. We have killed millions of our own kind in single conflicts. We have done things to each other that would give your children nightmares for generations." She looked around the hall at the ancient, comfortable faces watching her. "And we learned something from all that death. We learned that war is not a game. It is not a contest of honor. It is survival. When humans fight, we fight to win. We fight to make sure the enemy can never threaten us again. We fight with everything we have because we know what happens to those who don't." Ed's crystal form flickered. "You speak of barbarism as though it were a virtue." "I speak of reality." His voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. "You asked why we keep our weapons. It is because the universe is large and dark, and we have learned never to assume we are safe. We hope to never use these weapons again, but if any species threatens human worlds, threatens human lives, threatens human children," she paused, "we will respond with everything we have. We do not know how to fight small wars. We only know how to win." For a long moment, the hall was silent. Then Eth laughed. It was not a cruel laugh, more the laugh of a grandfather watching a child pretend to be a warrior. "Ambassador, your passion is noted, but you must understand, the Conquered has maintained peace for 12,000 years. We have resolved conflicts that would have destroyed lesser civilizations. We do not need your primitive methods. We have evolved beyond them." He gestured and new images appeared, sleek Conquered warships, elegant and precise. Our weapons target only military assets. Our wars last days, not years. Our conflicts end with treaties, not genocide. This is what civilization means. What you describe is what we were long ago, before we learned better. Looked at the images. The ships were beautiful. The weapons were precise. Everything was clean and honorable. And she knew with absolute certainty that these people had forgotten something important. "Then you will not accept our military partnership," she said. "We will accept trade agreements, cultural exchange, scientific cooperation, but military alliance?" Eth shook his head, light dancing through his crystal body. "The conquered cannot partner with a species that still wages war like animals. Perhaps in a few thousand years, when you have matured, we can revisit this discussion." Nodded slowly, she gathered her materials, she prepared to leave. But before she stepped off the platform, she turned back to face the assembled delegates. "I want this moment recorded," she said. "I want every species here to remember what I am about to say. Humanity accepts your trade agreements. We accept your cultural exchange. We accept being treated as children by those who have forgotten what childhood was like." Her eyes swept the hall. "But remember this, we warned you. We told you what we are. We told you what we are capable of, and you laughed. So when the day comes, and it will come, when something threatens this comfortable peace you have built, when something comes that does not care about your rules or your honor or your precision, remember that you laughed at the only species that still remembers how to fight for survival." She walked out of the great hall in silence. Behind her, the delegates returned to their comfortable seats and their comfortable lives. They had already forgotten her words. In a galaxy this old, this safe, this civilized, what could possibly threaten them? They would remember soon enough. 3 years passed. Earth traded with the conquered. Human scientists visited alien universities. Alien tourists visited Earth and marveled at a species that had built civilization while constantly trying to destroy itself. It was all very peaceful, very civilized. Then the came. The Dominion existed outside the conquered's borders. They were conquerors, tall, mantis-like creatures with 4 arms and eyes that saw in spectrums humans could not imagine. For 900 years, they had expanded their empire by absorbing weaker species. Their method was simple: arrive with overwhelming force, demonstrate superiority, accept surrender, integrate the conquered into the Dominion. They called it compliance warfare. 17 species had joined them this way. None had resisted for more than a few days. When scouts discovered New, a human colony of 2.3 million people on a green world at the edge of explored space, they saw an easy target. A young species, primitive weapons, no allies who would intervene. The conquered had made clear that humans were not under their protection. Commander led the invasion fleet personally. 200 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and surrounded the planet. He broadcast the standard compliance message: surrender immediately, accept Dominion rule, and the population would be spared. Resist and face consequences. He expected the humans to surrender within hours. Every young species did. Instead, New went dark, no response, no surrender, no communication at all. Was confused but not concerned. Perhaps their communication systems had failed. Perhaps they simply needed encouragement. He ordered 40,000 ground troops to land near the capital city and encourage the humans to comply. They descended through clear skies. The soldiers landed in neat formations in the fields outside the city. They began their march toward the population center, confident in their superior numbers and technology. The first explosion killed 300 of them. They had never encountered before. Why would any species bury bombs in the ground where their own people might step on them? It was insane. It was random. It was terrifying. But this was only the beginning. As the survivors regrouped and continued forward, they found the roads destroyed. Bridges collapsed, buildings booby-trapped. Every step forward cost them soldiers, and still they saw no enemy, no opposing army, no one to fight. Then the shooting started. It came from everywhere and nowhere, from windows and rooftops and holes in the ground. The humans did not stand in formations like civilized soldiers. They hid. They ambushed. They fired a few shots and then vanished before they could return fire. One officer led his unit into what appeared to be an empty building to escape the gunfire. Inside, they found a single human, a young woman with dirt on her face and a strange device in her hand. She smiled at them. Then she pressed a button. The explosion destroyed the entire building and everyone in it, including her. By the end of the first day, they had lost 6,000 soldiers. They had not captured a single block of the city. Read the reports in disbelief. This was not possible. These were farmers and miners, not soldiers. They had no military training, no advanced weapons. They were fighting with hunting rifles and homemade bombs. How were they doing this? He ordered more troops to land. He would overwhelm them with numbers. But the humans had used the night. While soldiers tried to rest in unfamiliar darkness, humans crept through the shadows. They had painted their faces and clothes to blend with the environment. They moved silently in small groups. They killed sentries without making a sound. They set fires and cut communication lines and vanished before anyone could respond. They did not understand. This was not war, this was hunting, and they were the prey. On the third day, a patrol captured a human civilian, an old man who had been caught placing explosives on a bridge. They interrogated him, demanding to know where the human military was hiding. The old man laughed at them. "Military," he said. "Son, you're looking at it, every man, woman, and child who can hold a weapon. We sent our kids and elderly to the shelters in the mountains. Everyone else stayed to fight. That's how we do things." The interrogator was disturbed. "You are not soldiers, you are farmers, teachers, merchants. Why do you fight?" The old man's eyes grew hard. "Because you came to our home, you threatened our families, our children." He spat on the ground. "My grandfather fought Nazis. My father fought in the resource wars. We have been fighting since before your species climbed out of whatever swamp made you. Did you really think we would just give up?" That night, the old man's friends attacked the interrogation facility. They killed every inside and rescued him. They also took weapons, supplies, and intelligence data. Sent a message to the Dominion High Command. His words would later be shared across the galaxy. "These humans do not fight like a military force. They fight like the planet itself is trying to kill us. Every civilian is a soldier. Every building is a fortress. Every road is a trap. I have lost 8,000 soldiers in 3 days. I have not captured a single objective. Request immediate reinforcement or permission to withdraw." The High Command was not pleased. They ordered him to continue. The Dominion had never failed to achieve compliance. They would not start now. Was preparing a new offensive when his sensors detected something emerging from faster-than-light travel. It was the Earth Defense Fleet, 34 ships against his 200. He was not worried. His fleet outnumbered them nearly 6-1. His ships were larger, better armed, more advanced. This would be quick. Then the human fleet broadcast a message on all frequencies. It was not a demand for negotiation. It was not a plea for mercy. It was just 4 words. "You were warned." Had spent 3 days learning what humans were capable of on the ground. He was about to learn what they could do in space. In orbit above Nu, a conquered observer named watched the 2 fleets face each other. He was young for his species, barely 300 years old. He had been assigned to monitor the humans after their amusing petition to the conquered. He was supposed to document their inevitable defeat. Instead, he was about to witness something that would change his understanding of the universe. "They cannot win," his assistant said. "The mathematics are clear, they are outnumbered." And remembered the human ambassador's words 3 years ago. "We do not know how to fight small wars. We only know how to win." "I am not certain," he replied softly, "that these humans understand mathematics the way we do." The first human missiles launched. The Battle of Nu had begun. Fleet Admiral Wei stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the fleet on his tactical display. 200 enemy ships, 34 human vessels. By any reasonable calculation, this battle was already lost. Wei had never been a reasonable man. He was 63 years old. He had studied every war humanity had ever fought, from ancient battles with swords and spears to the nuclear exchanges of the Third World War. He understood something that the galaxy had forgotten. War was not about fairness. It was about winning. "All ships," he said calmly, "execute battle plan Omega. May God have mercy on their souls because we will not." The human fleet split apart. Instead of forming a defensive line like civilized species did, the ships scattered in all directions. They raced toward asteroid fields, used moons for cover, and approached the enemy from angles that made no tactical sense. Commander watched the human movements with confusion. "What are they doing? This formation is chaos." His tactical officer studied the displays. "They appear to be..." hiding behind rocks, using debris as cover. This is not how fleet combat works. Perhaps they have given up, another officer suggested. Perhaps they realize they cannot win and are trying to flee. Then the missiles arrived. The human ships had launched thousands of them, not hundreds, thousands. The sky filled with metal, and these missiles were not carrying energy payloads or precision warheads. They were carrying rocks. Tungsten rods, depleted uranium shells, simple chunks of metal moving at incredible speeds. The shields were designed to disperse energy weapons. They were elegant, advanced technology that could absorb and redirect laser fire, plasma bolts, and particle beams. They were completely useless against heavy objects moving at 15 kilometers per second. The first wave of missiles hit the fleet like a hammer hitting glass. 37 ships died in the first minute. Their shields flickered uselessly as tungsten rods punched through hulls, bridge sections, and engine cores. Atmosphere vented into space. Reactors went critical. Ships that had survived 100 battles were suddenly filled with holes. Stared at his display in horror. What kind of weapons are these? Kinetic impactors, his science officer replied, her voice shaking. They are throwing metal at us, just metal moving very fast. That's barbaric, that's primitive, our shields. Our shields are designed for energy weapons, Commander. No civilized species has used kinetic weapons in ship-to-ship combat for thousands of years. There was no reason to protect against them. There was no reason, because no civilized species would use such crude, brutal methods. But the humans were not civilized. The humans had been killing each other with metal for their entire history. They had simply made the metal faster. The human ships emerged from their hiding spots and finally saw their strategy. They had used the chaos of the missile barrage to position themselves throughout the battlefield. Now they attacked from all directions at once. There was no front line. There was no organized assault. There was only hunting. Small human ships darted between larger vessels, firing at close range where the bigger ships could not bring their main weapons to bear. When a human ship was damaged, its crew did not surrender or retreat. They accelerated directly into the nearest enemy vessel. Watched in disbelief as a crippled human frigate crashed straight through the hull of a battle cruiser. Both ships exploded. The human crew had died, but they had taken a ship 10 times their size with them. They're ramming us, his tactical officer whispered. They're deliberately ramming us. Who does this? On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Wei gave orders with the calm voice of a man who had accepted his own death long ago. The ship shuddered as enemy fire found its mark. Warning lights flashed. Damage reports flooded in. The reactor was damaged, leaking radiation into the ship. Wei ignored it. He had a battle to win. All ships launch nuclear packages. Authorization code WEI-77 Black. Throughout the human fleet, special missiles launched. They looked like ordinary weapons, but they carried something the galaxy had not seen in nuclear warheads. They did not recognize them. Their sensors identified them as small missiles with minimal energy signatures. They did not seem like threats. Many commanders ignored them completely, focusing on the more immediate dangers. Then the warheads reached their targets, and the sky turned white. Nuclear explosions bloomed throughout the fleet. Ships that had been untouched seconds before were suddenly caught in expanding spheres of destruction. Electromagnetic pulses fried electronics. Radiation flooded through hulls. Secondary explosions ripped through vessels as their own ammunition cooked off. Down on the planet's surface, the humans of Nu looked up and saw new stars being born in their sky. They knew what those lights meant. Their fleet had come for them, and they were not fighting fair. The battle lasted 4 more hours. It was not a battle by galactic standards. It was a slaughter. Not because one side overwhelmed the other with superior numbers or technology, but because one side refused to follow any rules. When human ships ran out of missiles, they used their engines as weapons, superheating enemy hulls with thruster exhaust. When their weapons failed, they launched debris. When they could no longer fight, they crashed. A captain, his ship crippled and burning, accepted surrender from a human boarding party. As they took him prisoner, he asked the Marine leading the team a question that would echo across the galaxy. Why do you fight like this? This is not war, this is madness. There is no honor in this, no precision, no mercy. The Marine was a young woman named Sarah, no relation to the Admiral. She was covered in blood, some of it hers, most of it not. She had not slept in 3 days. She had killed 17 enemy soldiers with her rifle and 2 more with her hands. She looked at the captain with exhausted eyes. "Honor, you invaded our colony. You tried to take our people. You killed our families." She leaned close to him. "We have been doing this to each other for 10,000 years. You're not special. You're just next." When the battle ended, 31 ships escaped into faster-than-light travel. 169 had been destroyed. The human fleet had lost 19 ships, with 8 more too damaged to continue fighting. Nearly 3,000 human soldiers and crew had died. By any measure, it was a human victory. By galactic standards, it was a horror. The conquered observer transmitted his report with trembling appendages. He had watched the entire battle. He had recorded everything, and he understood now that his people had made a terrible mistake. "I do not believe they are primitive," he wrote. "I believe they are something we forgot how to be. They do not fight to prove superiority or establish honor. They fight to survive, and they will do anything at all to ensure that survival. The conquered dismissed them as barbarians. I am beginning to think we are the ones who have forgotten something essential. They warned us. We laughed. I am no longer laughing." On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Wei finally sat down. The radiation had done its work. He had hours to live, maybe less. His crew urged him to go to medical. He refused. "We won," he said softly. "That's all that matters. Send word to Earth. They know now what we are. Make sure the rest of the galaxy knows too." He closed his eyes and smiled. "We warned them. We always warn them. They never listen. Maybe now they will." He was dead before the message reached Earth, but his words and the battle he won would never be forgotten. The recording of the Battle of Nu spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every species with access to interstellar communication watched it. They watched human ships throw metal at the enemy. They watched nuclear weapons turn space into a temporary sun. They watched damaged vessels ram their opponents rather than surrender. They watched and they were afraid. The Dominion, which had conquered 17 species over 9 centuries, formally requested a ceasefire with Earth within days of the battle. Their message was simple. "We seek no further conflict with the humans. Our expansion will proceed in other directions." In private communications, officials referred to humans as the species too insane to conquer. It was easier to leave them alone than to face what they might do next. But the humans were not the only ones affected by this battle. The entire galactic conquered was shaken. High Arbiter Eth called an emergency session of the full council. The Great Hall of Thessaly Prime, the same hall where Ambassador had been laughed at 3 years ago, was now filled with delegates who had watched their comfortable universe crack. "We must discuss the human question," Eth announced. His crystal form no longer flickered with amusement. "What we witnessed at Nu cannot be ignored." A delegate from the consensus rose first. They were tall, silver-skinned beings known for their strict adherence to law. "What we witnessed was barbarism. The humans violated every principle of civilized warfare: kinetic weapons, nuclear devices, suicide attacks. They deliberately targeted ships that had already surrendered. This behavior cannot be tolerated." Another delegate, a floating sphere of living gas from the collective, pulsed with agreement. "We should impose sanctions, restrict their access to galactic trade routes, force them to adopt civilized military standards." "And if they refuse?" asked a smaller delegate from the species. "What then? Do we go to war with them? Did you watch the same recording I did?" The hall fell silent. Who had been given permission to address the council as the only conquered witness to the battle, rose from his observer's seat. He was young, but what he had seen had aged him. "Honored delegates," he began, "I was there. I watched human soldiers die rather than retreat. I watched their admiral command his fleet from a damaged bridge, knowing the radiation would kill him. I watched ordinary colonists, farmers, teachers, children's guardians, fight an invasion force with homemade weapons and stolen rifles." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "You call them barbarians. Perhaps you are right. But ask yourselves this: when was the last time any of our species fought like that? When was the last time we were willing to sacrifice everything, to protect our people?" Ed's crystal body flickered with something that might have been discomfort. "We evolved beyond such savagery. We found better ways to resolve conflict." "Did we evolve?" asked. "Or did we simply forget? Our civilized wars have rules because we assume everyone will follow them. Our shields block energy weapons because we assume no one would be crude enough to throw rocks. Our soldiers surrender when defeat is certain because we assume prisoners will be treated well." He looked around the hall. What happens when we face an enemy that does not share these assumptions? Before anyone could answer, the doors of the great hall opened. Ambassador walked in. She was older now, her gray hair turned white. She walked with the same calm dignity she had shown 3 years ago, but there was something different in her eyes, a weight that had not been there before. Ambassador, Eth said, you have been summoned to explain your species' actions. Reached the speaking platform, she looked up at the thousands of delegates watching her. 3 years ago, they had laughed at her. They were not laughing now. You want an explanation, she said. Very well, we fought a war, we won, our people are safe. What explanation do you need? Your methods, a delegate began. Our methods kept 2 million colonists alive. His voice was sharp. Our methods destroyed an invasion fleet. Our methods sent a message to every would-be conqueror in the galaxy. Humans are not prey. But the cost, Eth said. The destruction, the lives lost on both sides, surely there was a better way. Laughed, it was not a happy sound. High Arbiter, 3 years ago I stood in this very hall and asked for military partnership. I told you exactly what we were. I told you how we fight. And you told me we were primitive. You told me we needed to mature. You told me to come back in a few thousand years. She stepped forward. Well, now you've seen what primitive looks like. You've seen what happens when a species that has never stopped fighting for survival goes to war. And you're horrified, not because we lost, but because we won. Because our crude, barbaric methods worked better than your civilized precision. The hall was silent. You want to know why we fight like this? Because we learned something your species forgot long ago. War is not a game, it is not a contest of honor between equals. It is survival, pure and simple. When someone threatens your home, your family, your children, you do not fight fair. You fight to win. You fight with everything you have. And you make absolutely certain that whoever attacked you will never be able to do it again. She looked directly at Eth. You built 12,000 years of peace on the assumption that no one would ever truly challenge it. You stopped preparing for the worst because you forgot what the worst looked like. We never forgot. We couldn't. Our history wouldn't let us. A small voice spoke up from the back of the hall. It was the delegate, a species that had never spoken with before. Ambassador, ours is threatened by an expansionist neighbor. The conquered has offered diplomatic notes. We have asked for military assistance and been told to negotiate peacefully. This voice trembled. We do not know how to fight. Our people have never needed to. Will you? Will you teach us? Every delegate in the hall turned to look at the... Then they turned to look at. She was quiet for a long moment. Yes, she finally said. If you want to learn how humans fight, we will teach you. Not because we enjoy war. We don't. We've seen too much of it. But because the universe is dangerous and sometimes peaceful people need to remember that there is a difference between being peaceful and being harmless. She looked around the hall one last time. We warned you. You didn't listen. But we don't hold grudges. Any species that wants to learn from us is welcome to ask. Because whatever is out there in the dark, whatever threats this galaxy hasn't faced yet, we will face them better together than apart. She walked out of the hall. Behind her, for the first time in 12,000 years, the galactic conquered began to question everything it believed about war and peace. And in secret communications across the galaxy, 37 different species began drafting requests to humanity for military consultation. The rules were changing. The humans had made sure of that. 5 years changed everything. The humans called it the Awakening. Species that had not trained soldiers in began building armies. Fleets that had carried only ceremonial weapons started mounting kinetic cannons. Military academies that had taught the art of civilized warfare now studied human history, the brutal, bloody, brilliant history of a species that had never stopped finding new ways to kill. 12 species had formally requested military training from Earth. 47 more had quietly begun studying human war tactics. The human doctrine spread across the galaxy like a new religion, preaching a simple truth: survival matters more than honor. Not everyone was pleased. Some species refused to abandon their civilized principles. Some called humans a corruption, a sickness infecting the peaceful galaxy. But even they could not ignore what was coming. The first reports came from the Galactic Rim, the distant edge of known space where few species traveled. Survey ships found dead worlds, not abandoned, dead. Entire planets stripped of metal, atmosphere, life. Whatever had done this left no survivors and no explanation. Then the Axiom Collective revealed itself. They came from the void between galaxies. They were machines, not like the friendly artificial intelligences some species had created, but something older and colder. They had been traveling through the universe for millions of years, consuming everything in their path. Organic life, technology, resources, the axiom took it all. They did not negotiate. They did not threaten. They simply arrived and began harvesting. The first conquered fleet to encounter them was destroyed in 11 minutes. The second fleet, larger and better prepared, lasted almost an hour. The axiom did not fight like they did not demand surrender. They did not care about honor or rules or treaties. They simply killed everything that moved and took everything that remained. When a conquered ship broadcast a surrender signal, the axiom destroyed it anyway. Surrender was meaningless to them. Within 6 months, the axiom had consumed 17 conquered worlds. 23 million sentient beings had died, and the machines were still coming. High Arbiter Eth called an emergency session of the Galactic Conquered. But this time, no one laughed at the humans. This time, they begged. "We face extinction," Eth said, his crystal body now permanently dimmed by stress and fear. "Our fleets cannot stop them. Our weapons cannot harm them. Our negotiations mean nothing to them. We have tried everything our civilization knows, and it is not enough." He turned to the human delegation. "Ambassador, Admiral, we dismissed your warnings. We mocked your methods. We called you barbarians and primitives. And now we come to you in our darkest hour and ask, can you help us?" Ambassador was an old woman now, her hair pure white, her face lined with years. But her eyes were still sharp. Beside her stood Admiral Ways, the woman he had chosen to lead humanity's fleet after his death. Stepped forward. She was younger than her predecessor had been, but she carried the same weight. She had studied under Way. She had learned everything he knew, and she had spent 5 years teaching other species how to fight like humans. "We can help you," she said, "but you need to understand something first." She gestured and images appeared throughout the hall. Not of human weapons, but of human history. Ancient battles, medieval sieges, industrial-age slaughters, nuclear wars, the greatest hits of human brutality. "You called us barbarians because we know how to kill. You were right. We are very, very good at killing. We have spent our entire existence perfecting the art of ending lives." She looked around the hall. "But here's what you missed. Barbarism isn't a flaw to be evolved away. It's a tool to be mastered. You forgot how to use it. We never did." She pointed at the images of the Axiom Collective, cold machines harvesting a screaming world. "The Axiom doesn't care about your rules. They don't care about your honor or your precision or your mercy. They care about one thing, winning. So do we." She paused. "You have 2 choices. Let us teach you to fight like humans, ugly, brutal, and alive, or die like the civilized species you are." The hall was silent. Eth spoke first. "What would this human way of fighting require of us?" "Everything," replied. "Your shields are useless against kinetic weapons, redesign them. Your ships surrender when damaged, teach them to ram instead. Your soldiers fight in clean uniforms with precise weapons, teach them to hide, to ambush, to use the environment as a weapon. Your civilians flee from invasion, arm them, train them, make every city a fortress and every citizen a soldier." She looked at the ancient High Arbiter directly. 12,000 years ago, your species knew how to fight like this. You forgot because you didn't need to remember. But we kept that knowledge alive. We preserved it in our histories, our stories, our very blood. And now we'll share it with you, not because we want war, we don't. We've seen too much of it, but because some enemies don't give you the luxury of peace. Now a decorated war leader who had spent years training with human soldiers rose to support her. "I have fought beside humans. I have learned their ways. They are not easy. They are not pretty, but they work. They survive. And right now, survival is all that matters." The vote was called. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Galactic Conquered formally adopted a new military doctrine. They called it Earth Rules. The war against the Axiom lasted 7 years. It was the bloodiest conflict in galactic history. Entire species were nearly wiped out. Worlds burned. Fleets died by the thousands. But the Conquered learned to fight. They learned to use asteroids as weapons, steering them into Axiom harvester ships. They learned to booby-trap their own abandoned worlds, luring the machines into devastating ambushes. They learned that surrender was not an option, so they stopped surrendering. They fought until their ships were crippled, then crashed those ships into the enemy. They armed their civilians and trained their children and turned every colony into a death trap. They learned to fight like humans. And slowly, impossibly, they began to win. The final battle took place above a world called Thessaly Prime, the same station world where humanity had first been laughed at all those years ago. The largest fleet in galactic history faced the remaining Axiom forces. Humans fought beside species that had been enemies now standing together against the machines. Admiral commanded the fleet from the bridge of the UES Way, named after the man who had taught her everything. As the battle began, she broadcast a message to every ship in the fleet. They came to harvest us. They thought we were cattle, prey, resources to be consumed. She smiled grimly. They were wrong. Today we show them what prey can do when it learns to bite back. Today we fight not as separate species, but as one galaxy. Today we survive together. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the Axiom Collective was broken. Their harvester ships drifted dead in space. Their machine minds, for the first time in millions of years, understood something new: fear. In the aftermath, now old by his species' standards, by years of war, wrote his final report on humanity. They warned us, he wrote. We laughed. Now we fight beside them and we understand at last. They were never primitive. They were never barbaric. They were simply the only species in the galaxy that never stopped being afraid of the dark. And in the dark, fear keeps you alive. We called them because they came from a planet that tried to kill them every day. But we were wrong about what that meant. We thought it made them broken. Instead, it made them unbreakable. They learned to fight because they had no choice. And when the universe sent something terrible against them, they were ready. We evolved past violence. They mastered it. In the end, their way was right. Peace is precious, but only the strong can keep it. The galaxy rebuilt slowly. The scars of the Axiom War would take generations to heal, but something had changed forever. The comfortable peace of the old conquered was gone, replaced by something harder, fiercer, and more honest. On the hull of the new Joint Command Station, built over Thessaly Prime, where the old Great Hall had once stood, someone had painted an old Earth phrase in 100 different languages. See Parabellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. The galaxy had finally learned what humanity had known all along. The universe is dark and dangerous, and the only way to survive is to be ready for whatever comes. Not because you want to fight, but because you must. And somewhere in whatever afterlife awaited human souls, Admiral Way smiled. They had warned the galaxy. Finally, the galaxy had listened.